The winter wind began whispering across the valley long before the first snowflake fell. It moved through the tall pine trees like a warning that only a few people noticed. Most of the settlers in the small mountain village of Silver Creek, Wyoming, believed they were ready for winter, just like every year before. They would stack beside their homes and a few jars of preserved food in their kitchens. But near the edge of the village, beside a small wooden cabin built close to a frozen stream, a widow was doing something that made everyone laugh. Day after day, she carried baskets of vegetables, meat, and jars of soup outside into freezing air and buried them in deep pits carved into the snow and ice. The settlers watched her strange routine and shook their heads in disbelief. Some said she had lost her mind after losing her husband. Others joked that winter would steal all her food before she ever had a chance to eat it. Yet weeks later, when a brutal snowstorm buried the entire village and cut them off from the outside world, the same people would stand outside her cabin with quiet humility, realizing the woman they mocked had been preparing to save them all. Before we continue this powerful and emotional story, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel if you believe in silent heroes and second chances. Sometimes the people others laugh at are the ones quietly preparing for the hardest days. The widow's name was Margaret Collins, a strong and faithful woman who had moved to Silver Creek with her husband Thomas Collins many years earlier. Thomas had been a skilled hunter and builder who loved the rugged beauty of the Wyoming mountains. Together they built a modest cabin and began living the quiet life many settlers dreamed about. But the mountain life that once brought them peace eventually brought heartbreak. One autumn afternoon, while hunting in the nearby hills, Thomas slipped on an icy cliff and never returned home. The loss left Margaret alone in a harsh environment where survival required constant strength and determination. Many people expected her to leave Silver Creek and move closer to a larger town where life might be easier. But Margaret refused. This valley had been her home with Thomas, and she believed deeply that God had placed her there for a reason. So she stayed. The first winter without her husband was difficult. Margaret quickly realized how challenging survival could be in such an isolated place. Heavy snow often blocked the narrow mountain road leading to Silver Creek, sometimes cutting the village off from nearby towns for weeks at a time. During that first winter, she noticed something important. The freezing temperatures in the valley remained extremely stable once deep snow covered the ground. The air stayed cold day and night, creating natural conditions similar to a giant outdoor freezer. Margaret remembered something her grandmother once told her long ago. Before modern refrigeration existed, settlers sometimes stored food underground in frozen soil to preserve it through the winter months. The idea stayed in Margaret's mind. When spring arrived, she began planning something that seemed strange to everyone around her. Throughout the summer, she worked harder than ever before. She planted a large vegetable garden beside the cabin and preserved jars of soup, beans, and fruit using traditional canning methods. She also traded vegetables with nearby farmers for meat and dairy products. But unlike most settlers who store their food inside warm cabins, Margaret prepared something very different. She dug several deep storage pits beside the frozen creek near her home. Each pit was carefully lined with stones and thick wooden boards. During late autumn, when temperatures dropped below freezing, she began placing sealed containers of food inside the pits. Then she covered them with snow and packed the top with ice. The system created a natural frozen storage space protected from animals and sunlight. Neighbors passing by often stopped to watch her work. At first, they were simply curious. But curiosity soon turned into amusement. Some settlers laughed quietly, whispering that Margaret had become overly cautious after losing her husband. Others joked that she was trying to freeze food like people in the far north. To them, the idea seemed unnecessary. Silver Creek had survived many winters before without such strange preparations. Margaret never argued with anyone. She simply continued working, patiently filling each frozen pit with food supplies. By early winter, she had stored dozens of jars and containers beneath the snow. Then the storm arrived. It began late one evening with strong winds pushing dark clouds over the mountains. Snow fell heavily throughout the night, covering the valley in thick white layers. By morning, the storm had intensified. Powerful winds drove snow across the village, burying roads and blocking the only mountain pass leading out of Silver Creek. Communication lines collapsed under the weight of ice, leaving the community completely isolated. At first, the settlers remained calm. Most believed the storm would pass within a few days, but the snow kept falling. 3 days passed, then 5. The roads disappeared under massive drifts, making travel impossible. Food supplies inside many homes began running low as families used their stored meals faster than expected. Soon the truth became clear. The village was completely cut off, without fresh supplies from nearby towns. Silver Creek would have to survive on whatever food remained inside their homes. Panic slowly began spreading among the settlers. Children grew hungry, and elderly residents struggled to ration their limited supplies. People realized they had not prepared enough for such a long isolation. Meanwhile, inside her small cabin near the frozen creek, Margaret quietly walked outside carrying a lantern. She brushed snow away from one of the hidden pits and lifted the wooden lid beneath the ice. Inside were perfectly preserved jars of vegetables, frozen meat, and containers of soup. The food remained safe and fresh within the natural freezer she had created. Margaret began cooking large meals in her small kitchen. Soon the smell of warm soup drifted through the cold mountain air. Neighbors who passed by noticed the smoke rising steadily from her chimney. Before long, people started knocking on her door. Margaret welcomed them inside without hesitation. She shared meals with families who had run out of food and distributed jars from her frozen storage pits to anyone who needed help. For several weeks, the storm continued trapping Silver Creek beneath deep snow. But thanks to Margaret's preparation, no one in the village went hungry. Before we reach the ending of this inspiring story, take a moment to comment the word prepare below if you believe wisdom often looks strange before the storm arrives. Because the widow who had once been laughed at for freezing her food had quietly saved the entire village. And when the snow finally melted and the roads reopened, the settlers of Silver Creek never again doubted the quiet strength of the woman who had prepared when no one else did.